Cop Talk is brought to you by Good Greek Moving and Storage, your total relocation solution.
This is Cop Talk, talking crime, cases, and backing the blue. Now, here are your hosts, Captain Ed Mehmet and Detective Kevin Schroeder.
Hello, everyone. This is your co-host, retired Captain Edward Mehmet, New York City Police Department. Once again, I'm filling in for your host, retired Detective First Grade Kevin Schroeder. Where he is today is a big secret. Perhaps next week he'll tell you where he was. Today's guest is Bill Alexander, and Bill is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Law Enforcement Memorial Fund. Bill is a very prominent guy in this group, and we want to have him talk to you about his group, because National Police Week is coming up, and his group is very much a part of that. This National Police Week is held every year, and it's to honor police officers and other law enforcement officers who have died in the line of duties. So welcome, Bill. Say hello to the audience.
Joe, Ed, thank you very much for welcoming me to your show and letting me use your platform, however momentarily, to sort of talk about Police Week writ large, and more specifically, the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. So hello, audience. I appreciate your time, and thank you for tuning in.
Well, before we get into that, tell us about your law enforcement background.
Well, it seems like a lifetime ago, but of course, when I was a very small child, my grandfather was a huge fan of the show Chips, which I'm guessing both of you are familiar with, and watching Ponch and John as a young kid sitting next to my grandfather as he was in his lazy boy inspired me in some level of, feeling much greater than just, say, high-speed chases and shootouts. There was something really intrinsically good demonstrated in that show, where a single man or woman could really have an impact on the communities in which they were serving. And that show specifically sparked an interest in me in law enforcement that carried through my whole life. And much to my parents' chagrin, when I was 19 years old, they wanted me to go to college, and I up and joined the Air Force, specifically to be a police officer in the Air Force, and got stationed at Andrews Air Force Base, which was geographically the closest Air Force Base to my home in Northern Virginia. But even from my earliest days, I had this desire, this passion to do something to give back to the community in which I felt so intrinsically connected, and not just the community in Northern Virginia, but really the country writ large. And those early days on Andrews Air Force Base, I could immediately tell that there was a stark difference between law enforcement in the military and law enforcement, which I could see just outside the main gate of Andrews Air Force Base, and knew that I was not going to make it the Air Force a career, that I felt this calling to go out and do what I viewed then as real police work. So I did 4 years in the Air Force, immediately jumped ship, got hired by the Prince George's County Police Department, which is outside of where Andrews Air Force Base is located. And I served 25 years there. There's not a single minute of it that I regret. I was so incredibly honored and lucky to have been hired and to be in a position to serve that community up through the ranks, all the way from patrol officer up to I retired as a major. And I retired 2 years ago to take a role here at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, initially as the executive director of the memorial itself. And then most recently, the board asked me to step in and be their permanent CEO. So that is a high-level overview of Bill Alexander.
Oh, that sounds great. Regarding Police Week, can you tell the audience the history of Police Week?
Sure. I think there's multiple versions, but the version I will try to give you, I think, covers a good deal of the history. So I think most people think about Police Week, the starting point of that being in 1962. Then President John F. Kennedy declares that every May 15th will be Peace Officers Memorial Day. That's also the birthday of the FOP, who advocated for that holiday specifically. And so I think most people think of that as sort of the broad start of thinking about Police Week. Not that those of us in our profession, I hope you and your audience won't begrudge me saying we, us, our, when I talk about or think about what I still think of as our profession. But I think the profession writ large had feelings before 1962, like, hey, we as a profession are to some degree falling short in terms of recognizing the really significant cost to preserving our democracy, and that cost being borne by the men and women in uniform and a number of line of duty deaths every single year. So I think that was sort of the impetus. and certainly part of the groundswell of the idea that police officers, the men and women doing the job, should be honored. And that is Peace Officers Memorial Day every May 15th. It took an additional years for the memorial to become a reality. Then Senator Pell and Congressman Biaggi had tried for a number of years to get some bipartisan legislation passed, which would allow for the creation of this memorial fund to allow men and women across the country to donate to a cause, which would eventually allow for the planning, design, and building of what we now know as the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. That legislation is passed in 1984. It's in those late 70s, early 80s that the fraternal order police and to some degree concerns of police survivors begin to have some informal gatherings. Right at the Capitol, President Pat Yost from the FOP will tell the story even today that it happened to be in one of those that first year that a group of Boy Scouts just happened to be walking by and they sort of hung out and participated in that brief ceremony. But that really is the start of what you and I recognize now as a really concerted, broad effort across this country. And of course, I tell people even now, even beyond the borders of our country, every single year, police officers from around the world come to help celebrate, remember, honor our profession, and also specifically the men and women who have most recently given their lives in the line of duty. So that is Police Week. Police Week is centered around the date of May 15th. That John F. Kennedy declared Peace Officer Memorial Day. On paper, Police Week is generally regarded as the week in which May 15th falls. The reality is that the sort of tentpole organizers, which is us, the Memorial Fund, Concerns of Police Survivors, and the Fraternal Order of Police, stage a series of events. And so in many cases, what now is actually implemented as Police Week doesn't necessarily follow that calendar structure. But for the most part, the events track pretty well every single year. Our Candlelight Vigil, I would argue the tentpole event of all of Police Week, is held every single May 13th. It's on the National Mall. Tens of thousands of survivors and co-workers and fellow police officers from across the country, and again, visitors from around the world, come to that on the National Mall. Anyone listening to this today, if you have not been to a National Police Week, I cannot encourage you strongly enough. Even if you are not in law enforcement, even if you don't necessarily have a strong interest in law enforcement, I would argue that every citizen of this country should go at least once to Police Week to see the just absolute outpouring of grief, sorrow, but also celebration, redemption, to some degree, honoring, remembering, telling the stories of those men and women whose names have, again, been most recently added to the memorial walls. And not just them specifically, but all of the men and women whose names are on our very sacred walls, which today, right now, number more than 24,000. So a series of events across those broad calendar dates, all of which are focused on the survivors, the co-workers, remembering the men and women who have died in the line of duty. And we hope, I think all of us in the profession hope, not just to celebrate and remember them, but also, I might argue, to act as sort of a neon light in the sky, to hopefully permeate the otherwise strong barriers for most people's lives, whether, to get into the news cycle, to get into their social media feeds, to remind the citizens of this great country that there has been and continues to be a very real cost to upholding our democracy and keeping our community safe. And of course, that cost is the men and women who die in the line of duty, historically in the hundreds every single year. So hopefully I've given you some sense of what I think Police Week is, but of course you can fire away if you've got some specific questions.
Well, we were there last year. We intend to go again this year. Now, you mentioned before the FOP. For the sake of our audience, would you explain what the FOP means? I know what it means, but
Sure.
The audience
so the FOP is the Fraternal Order of Police. It's one of several police union organizations. They advocate on behalf of, they organize for, they to some degree bargain for benefits or pay to some localities. So the Fraternal Order of Police is a broad union organization made up of multiple chapters or lodges across the country. And it's very similar to a number of other organizations. Think PBA, of course, I'm blanking on what the PBA stands for now, but I'm guessing both of you know.
Police Officers Benevolent Association.
Yes, Benevolent Association. Yes, sir.
It used to be the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association for the longest time I can imagine. However, with so many women in the police department now in New York City, they changed the name to Police Benevolent Association. So it's a generic term, covers everybody.
So that is the FOP. It's a very similar organization to the PBA and some other organizations across the country, but it's certainly one of the most notable in the country and one of the largest, representing upwards of, I would say, 350,000 men and women in uniform across the country today.
Now, you mentioned before Senator Biaggi. I'm sure you're aware that he was a New York City police officer for many years.
I am aware, and I actually, just about 2 months ago, I had a conversation with his son. Just in terms of, hey, I wanted to reach out and introduce myself and say I'm so incredibly happy and proud to have been a member of the very same profession as your father was, and just really awestruck by what he was able to accomplish in those early 80 years to help get this legislation passed, which again allowed for the collection of money, which allowed all of us in this profession to have a place where we can honor the men and women, our peers who have died in the line of duty. And I tell people all the time that legislation was only to allow us to collect the money. It was not in any way, shape, or form soliciting or collecting money from the federal government or any other government. Every single dollar raised was donated individually or by, to some degree, corporate partners. We, as an organization, have not received a single dollar from federal, state, local government in terms of creating, managing, maintaining this very sacred memorial that I'm sure is just as much a part of your professional life as it is mine.
Guys, Joe Diamond here, civilian producer of Cop Talk. I just wanted to take a quick second to thank Good Greek Moving for sponsoring this podcast. Good Greek Moving and Storage has been named National Mover of the Year and the most referred moving company in the U.S. Spiro Georgiadakis, CEO and founder, was also a cop, so he knows the importance of safety and the risks of moving. All of his movers are screened and drug tested to ensure your safety. His movers are professionally trained at the Good Greek Academy to learn how to wrap, pack, unpack, load, and unload your precious belongings for a safe trip to your home. Good Greek is your total relocation company that will help you find a home, sell a home, get your insurance, transport your car, take your junk, and move you. They are your one-stop shop for all your relocation needs. Good Greek Moving and Storage is also the official movers of 18 college and major league sports teams in the state of Florida. So whether it is a move across town or across the country, trust America's best mover, Good Greek. Schedule your move today at goodgreek.com.
Getting back to Mario Biaggi, when I joined the police department, he was a lieutenant, and he had a very storied career. At that time, he was the most decorated police officer in the police department. I believe he came in the department around 1940. He was a postal employee, and he got very, very involved. In fact, there was this notorious situation around the early 60s where he was in a shooting in his car. Somebody jumped into his car, and he actually shot and killed the guy in the car. Wow. He was a very interesting man. His niece, I don't know, have you learned about his niece? She's far left. And
I have not heard about his niece, no.
Yeah, well, he has a niece with the same name, and she is so far to the left that I think he must be turning over in his grave.
Oh, wow.
So,
well, I've had a conversation with his son, and his son was very kind and very supportive of our ongoing efforts to, honor the fallen, tell their story.
Well, his niece, I believe, she's a political figure. I believe she has elected office. I just don't remember where. But it's very, very different than the father. Getting back to Police Week and your group, what would you say would be the signature event or events coming up?
Well, Police Week, again, there are some notable events. Concerns of Police Survivors host a full week-long series of seminars and get-togethers for survivors. It's a big conference, and they hosted it at the Washington Hilton, at least this year and last year. And so that is certainly not an event, but a series of events through the Concerns of Police Survivors. Of course, the Fraternal Order of Police hosts their memorial service at the Capitol, and that's always on May 15th. Unfortunately, though, that's not open to the public, largely related to security concerns. And historically, the president would at least be invited and oftentimes makes an appearance there. So the security there is very tough. So from my perspective, of course, I might be a little biased working for the Memorial Fund, but I think the tentpole event for all of Police Week is our annual Candlelight Vigil. Right now, we are in heavy preparations for what will be the 36th annual Candlelight Vigil. hosted by us. And it's, again, that it for many, many years, it was hosted at the memorial itself. But I suspect, as both of you know, our profession and the people who come out to support this event have grown way, way beyond the ability of the memorial itself to host or have that kind of capacity. Last year, we had something approaching 40,000 people on the National Mall to help us celebrate, remember, honor those men and women most recently added. And of course, we're expecting that same crowd size this year. And it really is an event which, again, I encourage anyone and everyone who is listening to this. This is not just limited to those in the profession. It's not just limited to those who might have some connection to law enforcement. This is for every citizen of our country to come, again, help celebrate and remember the men and women who gave everything in service to us. And it's where we read each of the names most recently added to the memorial. This year, we added 282 names to our very sacred walls. And so we'll be reading those 282 names this year. And as I suspect, as both of you know, having been there before, every single one of those names that is read is a real gut punch. It's a real person with a real story. And I think to a big, big degree, the men and women who are still doing the job, who are out there in the crowds in the thousands, every single one of them, certainly me, and I'm guessing you, Ed, every single police officer I know has at least one story, probably many times over more than one story, but it has at least one story where they, if the dominoes or the dice had rolled just one different way, if the wind had been blowing 5 degrees differently that day, the set of factors, the variables that could have flipped this way or that, every single police officer I know is convinced that, but for luck or chance or those dice rolling a certain way, their name could well have been on the wall.
That's
and so
sure.
if you read each of those names, it really is a good punch for everyone in the crowd, knowing there, but for the grace of God go I, it could have been my name that they were reading up there today. And of course, it's a testament to every single person in the profession today as they sit there and listen to those names and recognize what I might argue is a very real danger, that our profession is very dangerous. And I might also argue increasingly dangerous, becoming even more dangerous over time. So you're reading those names, you're acknowledging the very real cost of what it takes to maintain our democracy and keep our community safe. And those men and women out there in the crowd continue to do the job. They continue to show up. They put that gun belt on and bullet resistant vest. And every single day they are unfazed, ready and willing to go out there and help protect their community, to make a difference, even knowing that the cost might be their names being added to our very sacred walls.
Well, that's a great testament to the law enforcement profession. And I couldn't hear it any better. Now, in terms of numbers, how large of a turnout do you expect?
Again, we're expecting upwards of 40,000 people this year. We put out chairs, about 6,000 chairs just for the survivors. And then every single year, law enforcement, to its credit, comes out en masse to really support. Of course, I know you know this, New York has been and continues to be a really big presence in all things National Police Week, but certainly at our Candlelight Vigil. Historically, New York has been one of the states with the most line of duty deaths. So, we love the fact that New York has been so instrumental in supporting not just us, the Memorial Fund, but certainly all of the major tentpole events in Police Week. But really, there again is just no question. People from across this country come in the dozens and the hundreds. Departments, there's 18,000 plus or minus police department or public safety agencies across the country. There is just a massive, massive swell of support from all of the men and women who do this job across the country to try to come out and pay tribute to pay respect to help honor and remember those men and women whose names are being added. Again, completely understanding that every single one of them, their name could have ended up on the wall in any number of the circumstances or the incidents that they've handled. And any number of their names could end up on the wall in the future as they're continuing to serve. So it's a very, very emotional. I of course, I'm preaching to the choir. I know you two have been there, but I tell people you can feel the emotion in the air at that event. It's hard to even put into words, but the raw emotion coursing through the air there is really tangible. And again, if you have not been there, your audience, I can't implore them strongly enough. They should come help and support the families, the survivors, the co-workers, the men and women who are still doing this job. Come support that effort and see for yourself the real cost to what it takes to police this country.
If people are interested in attending, how would they reach out to you or the group? I'm not talking about police, but civilians who are interested.
Sure.
What should they do?
All of the information is on our website. Our website is the acronym of our name. So that's National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. The website is nleomf.org. So again, all of the information is there. Everyone is welcome. It is on the National Mall. You don't need a ticket. You don't need to go through a specific gate. The event is open to the public. So all you have to do is show up, take an Uber, get the metro, drive in yourself and park in one of the area parking garages. Just come to the National Mall, 8 o'clock on May 13th. Help experience, help support, help be there for the many survivors and coworkers who are there mourning friends, coworkers, not just a single thread in the sort of broad fabric of the law enforcement community, not a single thread in the communities in which those law officers served and died. I might argue something more than a thread, something really integral to the communities in which they served. And every single one of those names, their loss is just incalculable, not just to the family, but certainly to the family, not just to the agency, but certainly to the agency. But I might argue a really real loss for the entire country.
Well, what's going on today with law enforcement, with defunding the police and attacking the police, I think this year's event is more important than ever, just to show great support for our wonderful law enforcement group. So.
I could not agree more. I've been saying for a number of years, even when I was a commander with the Prince George's County Police Department before I left, I think the existential crisis facing law enforcement right now is recruitment and retention. I mean, there's just no question in my mind that we are just hemorrhaging police officers across the country. Every single police department I know of is undermanned and underfunded. I mean, just as an example, the Prince George's County Police Department I left is authorized about 1,800 sworn police officers. And when I left, they were at 15 something, and now they're at 14 something. And I suspect you could tell a similar story with NYPD. I mean, every single police department I am aware of is way under their authorized staffing, and the numbers seem to just be cratering even lower every single year. So, I think we as a profession have to grapple with the idea, what do we need to do to recruit, incentivize, educate, help garner the interest of the young people of our country and say to them, this is a very noble profession. This is a profession in which you can have an impact much greater than, I might argue, any other profession in the country today. There's no other job where you can have such an impact on one person's life or a broader segment of the community in which you're hoping to serve than being a police officer. And of course, maybe I'm biased, but how do we as a profession sort of bridge this gap through education, through community, through talking about service and sacrifice, through demonstrating our actions, in part through Police Week, but across the entire calendar year, giving people a sense that the men and women out there doing the job are 99.9% of the time doing the right things for the right reasons. Yes, police officers can and do make mistakes. Yes, very rarely, exceedingly rarely, men and women in uniform sometimes commit criminal acts. But the reality is, plus or minus 250 million times a year, men and women make contact with their law enforcement professionals in their community. And the vast, vast majority of those occasions turn out exactly the way that the men and women of this country expect those encounters to turn out. So again, not that police officers or institutions, public safety institutions, can't get better or do better, but I think I'm probably preaching to the choir. The reality is men and women in uniform, I might, again, argue, are really, really doing the right things, and often doing things, heroic things, which go completely unnoticed, completely unthanked. And so how do we bridge that gap? How do we get law enforcement the recognition they deserve, while also somehow communicating with and educating the public in an effort to get them interested in being a part of the profession? Those are big, big problems. And I don't know that I have the solutions, but certainly I recognize that what you're saying is something that we need to grapple with.
Well, I like to, I keep on pushing for the reinstitution of the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not. What is that?
Shows how dated I am. Well, after the riots of the 60s, the federal government said we have to do something to educate police officers and get them what they need. So a federal agency was created called the LEAA, stands for the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration. And part of that was a subunit called LEAP, L-E-E-P, the Law Enforcement Education Program. And that program, the LEAP program, allowed thousands of police officers, including myself, to earn college degrees free of charge. The government paid. So I attended college for 16 years, part-time, and I got a master's degree. And many of my colleagues did the same. And now they also, the LEAA was funding various studies around the country, giving grants to various vendors and institutions to come up with ideas of policing. It fell by the wayside some years ago, and I don't know why, but I think it should be reinstituted. So I would think that you ought to look into it and look into the history of the LEAA. And I believe that if that agency were brought back, it would solve some of the problems you're talking about. Now, on another point, regarding police work, I like to say it's the greatest show on earth. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with that. 100%.
All right, Joe?
There's never a dull, there's no other job where you really don't know what it is you're going to see on any given day. You get in your patrol car and to some, you're stuck with the radio, whatever calls you get, but you just have no idea. And every single day is a new chocolate box full of delights. And, sometimes for sure, men and women in uniform see horrible things, but also men and women in uniform have the opportunity to, again, make a real difference and go out there and, be part of the solution, restore order, stop chaos. And in the midst of that, you're absolutely right. It is the greatest show on earth. You will see everything humanly possible in your day-to-day interactions in a way that the vast, vast majority of the men and women, the citizens of this country, really have no way to see.
Yeah, every duty tour is an adventure.
I completely agree.
Hey, it's the Good Greek Spiro, and I have some exciting news. Good Greek has been awarded National Mover of the Year. You've trusted the Good Greek for decades with your family's moving and storage needs. Now Good Greek is proud to be the nation's top mover. So when it's time for you to move across town or across the country, trust America's best mover, Good Greek. Go to goodgreek.com for Good Greek, the National Mover of the Year.
Good Greek Moving and Storage, your superhero movers.
This National Foster Care Month, Marine Toys for Tots is providing hope to children who need it most. Staff Sergeant James Caldwell, who grew up in foster care himself, shares that while handing out gifts at a Toys for Tots distribution event, a little girl looked up at him, reached into her bag, pulled out a stuffed animal and said, "Someone needs to make sure you get a toy too." That simple gesture embodies the heart of Marine Toys for Tots, ensuring every child, including those in foster care, experiences the kindness that can transform their future. Visit toysfortots.org today.
Bill, as we speak, so in the background, we have the news monitors on for various news stations, and we could see on the campuses and in the streets, social turmoil is spreading in real time, perhaps more than any time in 50 years. Cops are on the front lines now more than ever. Are we as a society, what do we as a society have to do to give cops the backing now that they need in an existential way? I mean, I don't think I'm exaggerating here to say we're at some kind of tipping point now.
I agree. When I retired 2 years ago, I tell people that come see the memorial now that I am somewhat sheepishly embarrassed now to admit that when I left the profession 2 years ago, I was somewhat despondent, if I'm being honest, about what I perceived to be the American public support of law enforcement. And I've been very lucky and privileged to be now here at the Memorial Fund, and it's completely changed my mindset about the level of support for the men and women in uniform across this country. I mean, there's just no doubt in my mind now that there is a massive, massive undercurrent of support for law enforcement across this country. The problem is that you almost certainly are not going to see it on mainstream media. You're not going to hear it on MSNBC. You're definitely not going to see or hear it on social media. And to a worrying degree, I might argue, even from the mouths of too many of our elected officials who I might argue seek to demonize and place blame on this profession that I hold so dear and what I think is a deeply, deeply unfair way. So, I tend to agree with you that we as a country do seem to be nearing a tipping point in terms of the men and women doing the job and the leaders of those public safety institutions trying to find ways to interface and connect with the communities that they're serving, while also trying to find a way to educate that very same community about what it is that law enforcement has been doing and is doing to try to keep their community safe. And to some degree, that's a very difficult problem because, again, mainstream media and social media is entirely tilted in one direction where they seek to pull apart and find blame with every single encounter that a police officer might be on. And that's a very, very tough nut to crack. So what I tell people now is a big part of mending that gap, in my mind, is the American public standing up and letting their voices be heard, particularly by the men and women in doing the job. And so I say to everyone who comes to the memorial, please, if any part of my message resonates with you, if standing in the midst of these walls now holding 24,000 names, if that doesn't resonate with you, just recognize that it's not just the cost of the men and women who have died in the line of duty. It's also the cost, somewhat of a lesser cost. There's also a cost in terms of doing the job and feeling aggrieved, feeling like the community is stepping on you or doesn't appreciate your efforts. If you are a citizen of this country and you support the police, you must stand up. Find your local police officer, approach him or her, whether they're on the corner directing traffic, in their squad car, giving directions to someone, or maybe in a shop, maybe eating the hypothetical donut, right? Approach him or her and say, hey, thank you for your service. We appreciate what you're doing. Please keep doing a good job. In my mind, that has to be a big part of the solution going forward. Of course, we touched on earlier, recruitment and retention. We also have to find young people who are willing and able to do the job. But in my mind, a big, big part of the solution has to be the American public standing up, saying that we recognize law enforcement has been and continues to be just an overwhelming force for good, that we need law enforcement in our country, we need law enforcement in our communities, and that the American public is so appreciative of what the men and women in uniform do every single day and every single year. To me, that would be a big part of the solution.
Bill, thank you. I think you've summed it up beautifully and completely. Thank you.
And Bill, I want to thank you very much for this interview. We will do everything possible to get the people from New York to go to the event.
And at this time, I'd like to thank everyone for listening. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe. You could also follow us on Twitter at CopTalkWABC. That's at CopTalkWABC. Until next time, be safe out there. God bless law enforcement throughout the world, and God bless America.
Hello, folks. Larry Kudlow here. Pay attention, because China is leading the largest anti-American alliance since World War II. One that's already dumped U.S. bonds, grabbed 43 million acres of our farmland, and is plotting to dethrone the dollar. That's why IRA and 401k savers are protecting their savings with gold. Please go to freegoldguide.com/Kudlow or just call 800-621-3908 for your free gold guide on how to protect your wealth with gold 100% tax-free.